Finally, and thank you for staying with us, this is Chapter 5, the one in which we hear the thrival. This is the bit of Jonny's tale that serves as an example to us all when we are looking for that inspiration to find our purpose in life and reconnect with who we are and what can be achieved if the environment allows us to thrive. Jonny, you're out. You have absolutely got there. Tell us what happens on the other side of that horror.
Yeah, thank you. Because I've been looking forward to this, and it's wonderful. I think that I genuinely hope that what I'm about to tell people really gives a lot of people a lot of hope, because it's a proud achievement and where we've got to and where I've got to. So I leave in the June of 2019. Me and my partner go on a few days holiday, and I come back, and there's always an element of luck in these things. You have to have some luck. And my father is a successful businessman, and he's the hardest working man I've ever met, actually. He's a real force of nature in terms of the way that he approaches work. He's always working, and he's 61 now, and he does need to slow down a bit, but I don't think he's ever going to slow down. So my dad was, when I was a child, a self-employed carpenter. If he didn't work, he didn't get paid. And there was a lot of things I used to hear in teaching, like, "Oh, I'm tired." You don't know what tired is. Trust me, because my dad's working day, night, and believe me when I say this, he was, working class man, but very skilled and worked very hard. So I had a middle class lifestyle as a child. We lived in a nice village in a 4-bedroom detached house even with a detached garage. It's not like I went without. We went on nice holidays, but my dad was a damn hard working man, and he set up in I'd say now it's probably about 15 years ago now, but when I joined it would have been about 10 years before. He started his own carpentry contracting business, which meant less time on the site for him, more time picking up contracts, doing first fix, second fix, third fix carpentry. So everything from stairs, roofs, doors, you name it, the typical jobs that carpenters do. He was the managing director of this carpentry business. He would put people on sites. And naturally, my dad built a business that was making over 7 figures. So successful businessman. And he did this with my stepmom, Hawley. And long story short, even when I was a teacher, I would do part-time work for them in the sort of Easter holidays, summer holidays. And I would only do low-level admin for, just a bit of money. It was a good relationship that we had, because I didn't want to be sat around at home, and if I had the opportunity to make a bit of money, I did. So what I said to my dad was, "Look, I've left this school," and I don't think I gave him all the details. I think I just said I've left because I'm going to become a supply teacher, because I need to make a move, and I couldn't get out of this academy. But I left certain details out. You can't pull the wool over my dad's eyes, so I don't think he truly believed everything I was saying, and he didn't probe me too much on it. But what happened was, I was doing initially a bit of admin, filling in spreadsheets, filing things, helping finance, and I was only getting paid, near, not minimum wage, but not far above it. The kind of money that an administrative assistant would earn. So I'm only working for my dad because what I wanted to do was get through to the September to then become a supply teacher, which would then, my plan was to do supply teaching from September to Christmas, and in that term, find a permanent role at another school and rebuild my career. That was my plan. Now I'm working for my father's company, and what happened one day was my dad's business was on a site in Coventry. What we were expected to do, or what his business was expected to do, was maintain fire doors. Now, fire doors are an engineered safety device. They might look like an ordinary door, and they function as an ordinary door, but really they're what's called a passive fire protection system. And in the event of a fire, they are designed to stop the spread of fire and smoke, and therefore protect lives and protect property. so they have to be installed correctly. And I'm not going to go too far down into the details of this, but there are British standards that they have to be installed to. There is different doors in different scenarios have different installation instructions, different products have different compatibilities. So, and it's very scientific. To test a fire door costs around about, I think it's around about £25,000 just to test the door. And by the way, it can fail that test, but that, if it passes, then you've got a door that is effectively has passed and therefore can be used in a real life construction scenario. So my dad's job on this site is to maintain the doors and bring them back up to standard. My job was to go down there, deliver hinges, intumescent seals, which if you've ever been in like a hotel and you can see in between the door and the frame, there is sort of like, you might see a white strip, or you might see a strip with like a fuzzy brush on it, or a rubber blade. That stops smoke, but behind that is an intumescent, and intumescent reacts with heat and expands. So in the event of a fire, it closes all the gaps between the doors. Very, very scientific, very, very involved. And this site, all I'm doing is dropping things off and making sure that the job is moving along and filling in various paperwork, dropping triplicates into people's apartments just to say we'll be coming at so-and-so time. Very low-level stuff. Towards the end of the job, the principal contractor said to my dad, you need to get a fire door inspector to come down and sign off your work as a third party. So we did, and we found this guy who could turn up, and he charged £500 a day to look at the doors. My dad said, well, go around with him, make sure that, anything that we need to do, you're on it. Anything that we need to go and buy, you go and buy it, bring it back to the site and we'll get it done. Which, is so funny because like in teaching, you wouldn't have that attitude. Just get in the car, go and buy the stuff, bring it back, get it done. I love business because just get it done. My dad literally lives by the mantra of solutions, not problems. I swear teaching is the total opposite. It's problems, not solutions. Let's look at every problem we've got and not deal with the solutions. Well, in business, you can't do that. It's what are the solutions to our problem? Let's go with that. So I'm going around with this fire door inspector, and I have to say, I thought, well, he's got a lot of knowledge, but it's finite. There's a finite number of things that can go wrong with a door. There's only so many things, and generally it's gaps. Generally it's the hinges. There's not, does the door close properly? They're sort of the main ones. There's sort of 5 big ones. And after that, then there's a lot of technical knowledge. But I remember saying to my dad, he disagrees with me. He says it was his idea. I say it was my idea. Frankly, it doesn't really matter. What does matter is we sort of said, well, Jonny could become a fire door inspector and work for my dad's company, AJM, his initials. And we could send Jonny off to do fire door inspections, and then we can put the work right ourselves. And you've got to put this into perspective. This is all in the wake of the Grenfell Tower disaster. So a lot of this work had been neglected for years. There's a law called the Fire Safety Order that's been in place since 2005, and it wasn't really being enforced. And I wouldn't expect you to know anything about the Grenfell Tower inquiry other than phase 1 and phase 2 have been released. But as now somebody who's in the fire safety industry, fire doors, it wasn't just about the cladding. There were other things in that building that were wrong and had been wrong for a lot of the time, and laws that hadn't been followed and British standards that hadn't been followed. And that included the fire doors. So it sort of comes, this idea of Jonny needs to become a fire door inspector. And what we'll do, we'll put him on a course and he'll learn how to become a fire door inspector, and he'll go off and inspect these doors for us as a business, and we'll take him on. But that's not going to happen for some time. And Jonny still needs to go back and do supply teaching. And maybe in 2020, we'll take Jonny on as a member of staff as we sort of build the business up. As the summer wore on, so obviously I'm still not through to September, we're in July, August at this point, I designed a website for this new business idea, which I've done a little bit of this before because me and my partner tried to start a business when I was in teaching. It didn't work, but I learned a lot about business that actually helped me when this other opportunity came up. So I designed a website and I was learning how to become a fire door inspector. And it was through the process of learning, doing a course that, by the way, cost £4,000 I realised these resources are terrible. They're really, really poor. They mostly amounted to just pressing play on a video, a glorified PowerPoint, and listening to 45 minutes of a voiceover. Sort of. Fire doors are an important component in any building. It's really dry and people lose interest very quickly. £4,000, though, was an absurd amount of money. Now, the summer wears on. I'm looking to go back into teaching, but I do start saying, look, I like working here with your dad. I like working here with you, Pauline. And last week of August 2019, they called me into a meeting and said, yeah, we want you to start full-time in September. This is it's an opportunity for you, but we're only going to pay you £25,000 a year, which was around about a £5,000 drop from what I was earning in teaching at the time. And they took me on, and I was working a lot longer hours, to be quite frank. I was getting to the office at 7 in the morning and probably leaving at 6:30. Which is, my dad's an hard-working man, and I wasn't going to be turning up after him and leaving before him. He just wouldn't have stood for it. So I'm put on this course, and I feel this deep sense of responsibility because, and I do want to say this, and my dad didn't take me on because I'm his son, because I've got a sister and she doesn't work for us, and Pauline has a daughter and she doesn't work for us. So I wasn't given some preferential Johnny Golden Boy treatment. It was a case of, we think Johnny does have something to offer the business and it might be good. Let's see how it goes. And if it doesn't work out, you've always got teaching. But it did take a lot for my dad and my stepmom to take me on full time. And I do thank them quite very much so for that, because that was a big thing for them to do, to put that trust into me, to put me on a course that cost £4,000. And I felt this deep sense of responsibility to pay them back for it. Now, through the September, October and November, I'd learned how to become a fire door inspector. At the time, there would have been a handful of people in the country who had knowledge on fire doors. To put this into perspective, there are 3 million fire doors manufactured and installed every year in the UK. And there was probably only somewhere between 50 and 100 people who really knew what they were talking about with them. And probably only 10 who were genuine, real experts who could carry all the laws, all the standards, all the science and marry it all up. There wasn't many people who could do that. And I certainly wasn't at that level, but as daft as it sounds, I was probably one of the top people in the country on fire doors because there just wasn't enough people. So I go off and I start doing all these fire door inspections, and I'm getting paid, and it was all going quite well, and we were picking up. It wasn't every day that I was doing inspections, but eventually what happened into 2020, obviously COVID came and I was furloughed because there was no work. Nowhere would have been for fire door inspections. There was no other work really going on. So I had to wait until I think the end of May. And then we got through, I'd say probably mid-2020, and I went back to work. We picked up a big contract at a hospital. And around about this time, they put my pay up to £30,000. And then a few weeks later, it was £35,000. And we kept sort of saying amongst us, we should do the training. We should deliver the training. We should do that because clearly there's a market for it. And it's, Johnny is a teacher, so he can design the lessons and he can deliver the training. And there was other people doing it, and we sort of went into business with them, and I was delivering other people's courses. So now I'm doing a bit of inspecting and a little bit of training. And it was in 2021 that because what we were doing, we were delivering the training through my dad's firm, AJM. And I remember saying one day, well, the name is ambiguous. What does it mean? We need to be more clear about what if we're going to go and do training, we should be called something more appropriate. So I went on GoDaddy, which is, if anybody doesn't know what that is, it's where you can create domains and URL, as you know, google.com, if you like. That's where you create your website. So I found ukfiredoortraining.com. And I thought, it does what it says on the tin. And I'd done a lot for my dad's business and growing the inspection business. I'd done a lot of work on marketing. I'd done sales when I was in Australia. I knew how to close a deal. I knew the correct sales copy language. I knew how to design websites. So there's a thing called search engine optimization, how you get higher up Google. And all of these things I'm learning because it's essential for me to grow this business because it's an opportunity for me. So I create ukfiredoortraining.com and I design the website in a way that's optimized for Google. Trust me, if anybody ever reads about SEO, every book says to you, Google doesn't care about your domain. They do. They do. Because after 3 months, ukfiredoortraining.com was in the top 3 of Google. AJM, which had been doing the same thing, was about 50th. So trust me, if you want to start a business that's something, in something, let's say, I don't know, chocolate. something chocolate.com probably is going to do a hell of a lot better than just your surname. So I promise, in my experience, ukfiredoortraining.com did what it said on the tin and it positioned us high up on Google. What I did was I remember very distinctly in 2021, somebody else had designed some courses and we wanted to white label them, put our logo on this other person's course. And my dad and Paulie, my stepmom, were in agreement with this. And I was pretty much in agreement because I was very busy and I didn't feel I'd got the time to go and design my own courses. I knew I could deliver them, but not necessarily go and design them. I didn't even at the time feel that my knowledge about fire doors was quite good enough. But what happened was, for whatever reason, the person who we wanted to go into business with, frankly, was being a little bit greedy. Wanted too much for their course to put our logo on theirs. Intellectual property like that is probably worth somewhere between 2 to 10%, depending on the industry. And I think this person wanted 50, 60%. And as my dad literally said to him, so you want us to have the website, you want us to do all the advertising, you want us to have all of the risk, and you still get to walk away with 60% of the money? Yeah, not happening. And it was me who really said to my dad and Pauline, I said, forget the deal. There is no deal. Stop trying to make a deal. You're never going to get him down to 10%, which is where we need to be at a worst case scenario. The best you're getting to is 50. I can do it. I can design the courses. So throughout the summer of 2021, I went away and designed a fire door installation course, a fire door inspection course, and a fire door maintenance course. They had all tasks in them, drag and drop, and true and false questions, because I knew that you'd learn way better doing it that way than you would just watching a PowerPoint with it and a voiceover for 50 minutes. And I designed this course. Looks nice, got a good logo, good name, good website that I've designed. I know how to handle sales calls because I've done it all before. And we booked the NEC for the fire safety event, which was in the September of that year. It had got moved because of COVID. And we turned up with my dad's business next to me and my business right alongside. And my dad's business had a lot of conversations that week. I had a queue. Fire door training. We need fire door training. What is this fire door training? We've got so many fire doors, we don't know what to do with them. And I was there telling them about my course and what we can do and how I'd got an iPad with the courses that I built on them. And we got our first sale that week. And it just felt like we're onto something here. It validated the idea. We're onto something. This could be a really good business. It just snowballed. There were certain things that we did that I got right. And I know I got right because everything in my life that I'd done, I'm not, like I say, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in fate. But it was almost, it was like that Slumdog Millionaire where he knew all the answers because of all of the experiences in his life. I knew how to do sales because I'd done them in Australia. I knew how to design websites because I'd done them previously. I knew about SEO because I'd read about it previously. I knew about teaching and how to train and how to write good lessons because I was a teacher. And I was the only person in the country who was a fire door expert who was also a qualified teacher. So I was so uniquely positioned to just be an expert. I was just able to be an expert. And
I think that's brilliant, Jonny. And what I'd like to do now is, because that thrival, that where did you go straight after the teaching? How did you make it work? Jonny, bringing this to our sliding doors question in a moment, which is so interesting to be able to use the pun sliding doors with a fire door. Jonny, just in a nutshell now, really succinctly, where's the business at and where's it going? So that's how you started. Currently, what does the business look like and what's the plans for next year?
Okay, so I'm the managing director. So I'm the creative driving force of the business. I'm the man in charge, so to speak. My dad has very much of a hands-off approach. And we are on course this year to turn over £1.5 million. We have made a profit every single year, and that profit margin is very, very healthy. We are currently in the process of expanding into the USA. We will then follow that up with expanding into the Middle East. We are moving into other areas of fire safety. So we now have a new business called UK Training Company, which is going to act as an umbrella company. And UK Fire Door Training will no longer be a business. It will become a brand. And we're going to have UK Fire Safety Training to do other areas of fire safety, UK Construction Training, UK Health and Safety Training. And I'm the one driving all of that. We have 4 full-time members of staff. We have a trainer. In fact, we have 2 trainers because we now do fire stopping, which is a totally different area of fire safety, similar to fire doors, and then it's passive. But I don't actually know that much about it, but we delivered our first practical course of that this week. So the business has gone from strength to strength under my management. I have a wonderful team of people around me. I have an excellent head of training in my colleague Kyle, who really keeps things well-oiled, excellent worker. I trust it unequivocally, and he has a lot of background in training and regulated qualifications, which is an area we're moving into. I have a wonderful sales team, Dorian and Lauren, who are actually man and wife. We all get on so well. There's no two-facedness. There's no gossip in our office. We all just get on really well. We speak to each other with respect, and we all drive in the same direction. So our business is very healthy, profitable. And when I say profitable, it's, let me try and word this a different way. It doesn't take too much of a genius to figure out that a business that's turning over 1.5 million with around a 30% profit margin is very healthy. And we believe that the business can double and then double again and then double again for at least the next 5 years. So we hope to get the business up to around about, best case scenario, £20 million turnover in the next 5 to 10 years. At the lower end, it's already a very healthy business, and it's certainly got no chance of slowing down. And the way that the industry is becoming more regulated is only good for us, and we're expanding into new areas. We are uniquely positioned in that we don't have a large staff body because we've been able to automate a lot of our processes. So we're much leaner and able to make quicker decisions. So we've got this incredibly strong business that I am very proud to have built.
Wow, Jonny, just hearing that, I knew the person who went in and said, I am ambitious, I want to be a leader, found his route outside of teaching. Now, I've posed this question to you, my friend, the sliding doors moment of your life. What has happened to you since you left teaching that you know for a fact wouldn't have happened had the head of history not insisted on chuckling and slamming those books down on that desk?
Well, there is so many things, I suppose. I mean, we won an award earlier this year, a local business award. We were the best new business, and that was a wonderful moment. Got a nice little trophy downstairs in our reception. But that actually isn't my moment. My moment is, it's sort of a moment in time, a snapshot in time, I suppose. Something that could never have happened if I was in teaching is in the January of this year, my wonderful partner turned 30. That's in the January. Well, if you're in teaching, you can't go away. And we were able to go to Orlando, Florida, and we spent her 30th birthday in Florida, which we never could have done had I been in teaching. And I've been totally and utterly honest with you. And this is, I've tried my very best not to sound arrogant, but I'm going to say something now that I earn a lot more money than the head teacher who basically told me I was incompetent. So And I'm on course to make a hell of a lot more money in my life than he probably will ever make. So trust me, we went to Orlando with no budget. We just did what we wanted, when we wanted, how we wanted. And there are certain things we didn't get a chance to do. So we've rebooked to go again in another couple of years for a lot longer period of time. So that's wonderful. But 2 months after we came back, I had been living in my nan and granddad's home, and I was able to buy it. So it's my first home. I bought my first home, and that was in the March of this year. And I'm currently renovating the property. And it's a real privilege to live in that house, because my nan and granddad lived in that house since the 60s. And it was a wonderful family home. My mum grew up in that home, and now it's my home. And it's meant that my granddad has had some legacy as well. And I realised one day, I was sort of outside and I was looking at the sky, sort of nice sunny afternoon. And I thought, you could have gone to Orlando, but you couldn't have gone when you did. And you could have bought the house, but you couldn't have done both. There was no way on this earth that you would have been able to afford to go to Orlando, and there's no way you would have been able to have bought a home within a 2-month period of time. And that, for me, as an ambitious person, and look, I know that I don't want to make this all about money. It's not all about money. I am somebody who's driven by success, and I am somebody who's driven by money. That's probably why I was so depressed in teaching, because that's what I wanted. I wanted to have money and get on in life, and obviously I'm being held back. But to get to that point where you can buy your first home and go on holiday and not really care that much about the money, and you can protect and provide for those around you, that was all I ever really wanted. And now I've got it. And to look at the sort of lovely afternoon and go, you're the man, you've done it, man. You are the man. Do you know, and like now I drive a £90,000 car, and I'm on a 6-figure salary, and everything that I knew I deserved, I now have.
Jonny. I want to just say absolutely thank you for everything you did, for reliving in part 1 with such clarity and such a resource for our listeners who've been there.
Thank you.
Because everything you said there, it's the inspiration thrown in with some information and education. Jonny, you're going to go down as a legend. And on behalf of myself, Sarah, and everybody listening, I want to thank you for being an exceptional Pit Pony guest.
Thank you so much.
Well, obviously not just in terms of the length of our time spent with Jonny, but the amount of stuff that has come from those episodes of the podcast with Jonny Millard. For me, and I'm going to start you off and see if this is what chimed more than anything. I don't think I've ever heard anybody capture as eloquently and as accurately the impact of being bullied and not being able to evidence it other than just a feeling, and microaggressions and non-verbal communications, as well as Jonny did. And when he tried to explain it to his head teacher and couldn't quantify it and wasn't listened to, I think there on our particular podcast episode, we have captured the absolute frustrations of so many people who are bullied within the workplace and not just teaching. What do you think?
Yeah, I think for me, when we talk to people in the group, and you see it so often that people come to an awareness of something, and then the advice will often be, get a timeline written down, get everything logged from this point. But it's the stuff before that point of awareness, isn't it? And it's very difficult then to go back and put a timeline on it, and to put the precision on it that somebody who you're going to go to is going to say, okay, well, where is the evidence? Now, unless you're like me, where you can go, well, on this day this was said and all the rest of it, and there will be people like me who are really annoying who can remember things like that, but you still can't prove it. And there's a parallel for me, and we had a long conversation with Jonny after the recording. There is a parallel to me about bullying that children experience in schools and how that's dealt with, and also the fact that we've not learned from the experience of bullying of children in schools over decades and decades and decades, because that is quite often the experience for children. Well, what did they do? When did they say that? How it's so frustrating because it quite often is intangible. It's about a feeling rather than a specific action. And that, I guess that's what makes things like tribunals and bringing a grievance and all of those things really difficult.
Correct, because the starting point is, this is how I'm feeling. And and it can be extreme, Sarah. I am frightened of seeing this person in the corridor. My knees lock. I get tongue-tied when they ask me for anything. And I don't know how that's happened. Because it might have been that was the person who interviewed you. That was the person who showed you around the school. And over whether it's a lengthy or even a very short period of time, being in that person's company disables you. That's the feeling. I am disabled in that person's company, and it's seated in fear. Fact and real for me. Now, how can you prove or justify that as a grown professional, somebody is making you feel like that when in other areas of that school, they are the most lovely, compassionate, kind. They are the person who's bringing cupcakes in for TAs, and the receptionists love them because they have got many different faces in that world, and sometimes they are so important to that head teacher and the running of that school that they don't want to hear that this person is a bully. But if you're going in there and saying, this is how that person makes me feel, you're gaslit in the first instance that the person you're talking to doesn't believe you because that's not their experience of them. Strike one. Strike two, what do you mean? Explain how they're making you feel. And then even with a list, he slammed a book down on the table. Did he really slam it down? And he chuckled. It comes utterly ridiculous out of your mouth. He was laughing and joking with another colleague. I walked in the room and he was very cold with me. Well, what do you mean by cold? Because it goes right back to the person who's experiencing it to have to justify it. Now, in other areas and walks of life, Sarah, our starting point when a child is disclosing, when a victim of domestic violence is disclosing, they come from a position of being believed. That's the first starting point. I believe you, and I need you to know that what you're feeling right now is completely and utterly valid to you. I hear you, I sympathise with you, and I'm here for you. And even if they don't come off the fence about that other person, and if I'd have just heard this, I don't want you feeling like this in my workplace, Sharon. What do we need to do to get you back confident again in the workplace? Boom. I'm in a different conversation then with a head teacher or a line manager or a grievance procedure. And actually, those of you who can't see, Sarah is holding up a quote that we made up. We actually made up. Sarah spoke it to me one night on the phone when I couldn't explain why I was feeling. She's holding it up, but I'm also looking at it in my office. It's okay that I am feeling this way. It makes absolute sense that I am feeling this way. And if that's what Jonny would have heard, Jonny, it's okay you're feeling like this. It's real. Now then, let's go through what is happening, what behaviours and atmospheres are making you feel that way. That is framing conversation.
And I think it goes to something that you and I have said before, and no doubt will say 1,000 times over again. If we managed our adults in schools in the way, from the place that we come from, with children and safeguarding and bullying, then things would be a lot better, because it is that being heard and being validated. And I go to, what do we do? There was a big thing in schools, and I'm sure it's still there. I'm 5 years out now, but it's restorative justice, and actually there will be people rolling their eyes as I say this, but the principle of restorative justice, where it came from in the criminal justice system, is actually very powerful. But as with everything that gets taken into schools, it gets bastardized and made into something that it isn't actually. But that's a prime example of where a good leader could have brought those two people together to have a mediated conversation, to actually try and air that out and come to a place of both perspectives. And you 100%. said it afterwards that there's my story, there's your story, and there's the truth. And that's the thing for me, is there's, oh God, we could talk about this for hours, that there is an absence of that skill set in many leaders. That you go back to my statement about tortoise on a fence post, they haven't got those skill sets in mediation, in people management, in all of those things. And actually, if they did, they would do the thing that you do with kids more often than not, which is bring them together and let's try and iron this out.
So just imagine for 1 minute, Jonny would have gone into that head teacher and he'd have done that. And then he'd have gone to the head of history and said, okay, I'm going to do exactly what you've just outlined. And Jonny gets the opportunity to talk about how ill it's made him. But the head of history says, Jonny, do you know how frustrated you make me? Jonny, this is what I need from you, and this is what you need from me. And it is a dialogue, because there's Jonny's story, there's the head of history story, and then there's the truth of what's happening. Jonny, by his own admission, right the way through said, I never knew when to keep my mouth shut. I was totally ambitious. He could, without have realising, really threatened that head of history's position, because he made it quite clear that was the job he wanted. Now, had the head of history been able to frame Jonny's behaviour around him, you would have come to some kind of an understanding, because that's exactly what I would have done to a head of year. As a head of year, I'd have pulled the kid and gone, have you any idea what you're doing? Now, restorative justice only works if there's empathy in the room, because you could go to a kid and they go, don't care. Right, game over. Well, if you don't care, as an adult, I'm now going to do something about it, because it's your job to care. And there's where we've got the power. Actually, you're a professional. You are paid to manage him. Oh, and Jonny, you don't care about how you're making the head of history feel. Right, now I've got disciplinary. Now I've got something different. And I just think it was important at that point to really capture how low-level behaviours and atmospheric changes within a department can bring you to your knees. And it doesn't have to be somebody who's in a position of power above you. It can be your job share. It can be a TA. It can be anybody who has got you and they've eroded your sense of self-worth and esteem. So I think that in itself was great. I think the reference situation again.
Yeah, I mean, I want to go to integrity, and what he said about his own integrity when he'd committed to that job in the second school or third school, I've lost track now, but that he'd made that verbal commitment, so he was going to honour it because it was his own integrity. And the peak irony, and I wrote this down, the peak irony of will support you 100% of the way, offering him the job. And I wrote this question down, and I should have asked him. They rang and offered him the job, and at the point where they tell him they're offering him the job, they tell him, oh, by the way, we've had an Ofsted and we're in special measures. Well, that should have been up front before it even started. So there was a big red flag for integrity for me there. And then there were just so many things along the way where it was obvious that there was not integrity in terms of the culture of that school. The thing about the support staff and that email that went out and to all staff, I mean, stroke of genius, and listeners obviously can't see what the two of us were doing at that point, but there was support for that in some respect from the two of us in terms of go you. But that it was clear that the integrity was not part of that school's culture, that it was ego, that it was intimidation, that it was that rather than respect that was driving the culture. And he said something about his first school, which is, whilst the behaviour was challenging, the staff were great. And that really resonated with me because I've worked in tough schools where the challenges were absolutely there, but the culture of the school was rooted in the staff working together from a place of integrity and honesty and wanting to do the right thing for the children. And that's how you get a school from special measures or requires improvement to good.
Yeah, and interesting that when he talked about his first school, that's all he talked about, kids.
Yeah.
We had this demographic of kids, we used to do this, we used to do that, used to do the other. When he started to talk about that second school, apart from the critical incident with the laptop card, never talked about kids. Never once talked about that in any way, because the focus of that school was the staff. Now, we're going to spend time in Jonny's world, very much so, because his tribal story, it's amazing. You know, he's segued into his father's business. They found a niche. He's still training. He listed all the things he was still doing. That was fantastic. Everything that he'd taken from the classroom that he was loving, and he did it really, really well. But I know he's not got over that period of time. There's no two ways about it. It's still very much, and he's got to come to peace with what's happened. He accepts it was the platform to get him to where he is now. He wouldn't have his life any other way. But there is unhealed trauma and injustice where he's concerned, and it will. Time is the healer eventually. You genuinely stop caring. But I think he wanted to champion people who are still going through that now, because one of the things that's always important is that you are in a contractual arrangement with a school. You are protected under employment law. There are rights, there are responsibilities, there's contractual agreements. But if you are so frightened and unheard, they mean nothing, because you are not going to walk into a head teacher's office and say, I want a copy of the grievance procedure.
There's too much fear.
Fear. He didn't walk out of that head teacher's office and say, right, well, you've not listened to my grievance. I'm now whistleblowing. He was so far removed from that. He might not have even knew that was available to him. But when I speak to members of Life After Teaching and say, take a grievance out, nothing ever works because this has happened before, then whistle blow. And you might as well say, go and take a pair of boxing gloves into school and punch your head. They can't do it. They're absolutely crippled with fear. And I think it was an incredibly powerful episode to anybody, whether they are within teaching or within any form of organisation. Bullying is still one of the biggest issues we face in the workplace. And I hate the expression low-level bullying. There's no gradients. You're being bullied. You're either being bullied by groups of people, single peoples. When you set foot in the workplace, it is the core responsibility of any leader to keep you safe. And at the most important peak of that safety is your emotional safety. And he was not safeguarded in that school.
And it's interesting you raise safeguarding, because I'll go to KCSIE, my favourite document. She said tongue in cheek, but he was investigated in relation to the audio,
alleged assault.
The alleged assault. Yeah. Absolutely. And it's interesting that he was able to exit the school without any form of settlement or legally binding agreement, and the investigation was dropped. Now that tells you something, because under KCSIE, if there is an investigation, there is a specific paragraph in KCSIE that almost prohibits a school from cutting off an investigation, even if the person resigns. And so the fact that that school did stop that investigation says one of two things, which is either they don't follow KCSIE properly under the statutory guidance, or that investigation was purely a tool to manipulate and bully somebody to the point where they went.
And why do we have that paragraph? We have that paragraph because there was a school caretaker that kept jumping between schools, and the investigation went away. And that school caretaker slipped through the net for exactly that reason. There's been an allegation against Mr. Huntley. Not a problem. He's resigned. He's gone. Jumped to a different LEA. No record of it. And that's why that was brought in, to never allow somebody to go under the cover of darkness again. So that was so astute of you to pick that up, because I just think it goes into the fact that if you touch unlucky in a school and you've no way of knowing, because they're not on Trustpilot, are these schools? You can't go in and look at reviews from staff. But what you can do is you can start to empower yourself and know your rights when it first starts. Can I just stop you there for a moment, please? The way you've put that book on that table and laughed, this is how I've received what you've just done to me. I feel intimidated and belittled. Now, if you can do your opening gambit the first time that happens, or the second time, you're not as disempowered 6 months down the line. And it's finding that voice, because in my experience, when you call them out, they fold like a cheap suit, because they're fundamentally frightened of getting in trouble themselves, which is why they're used as a spot ball. But Sarah, I'm going to bring our epilogue to a close, because it's turned into a marathon episode with Jonny.
It's the Lord of the Rings. It's the first half.
Spartacus. So I have no doubt that a lot of people will have listened to this episode, and what we will do is, under the notes, we will put organisations that you can reach out to if you have felt like Jonny, if you do feel bullied, if you don't feel heard. We will ensure that all of the links go into the notes to who you can contact. And of course, there is the Life After Teaching Facebook page, which is filled with a wealth of support. Because one of the things that we said to Jonny was, had you have had our support and our voice 6 or 7 years ago, things might have been very different. But what I did say to Jonny when we were talking afterwards is where I think this episode will be most powerful. If you are listening to this and you've never been able to articulate to anybody how you feel, a parent who maybe doesn't have the emotional literacy to understand and say, don't be so daft, or a spouse or a partner or one of your kids, play them Jonny's episode and say, I want you to listen to this because this is how I feel. And I think that is where we will be deeply indebted to him for the time, the great amount of time he spent with us. And from both Sarah and I, we genuinely hope you're not in that place, because it is a lonely and a very, very disturbing place to be in. But Jonny did thrive on the other side. It's not the end of his story. I suspect there are great things ahead of that businessman who lost his TLR, in charge of business in the school. Peak irony, bucket pinking again. So, thanks for listening. Thank you for your time. And we will see you soon with another amazing episode of the Pit Pony podcast. On behalf of myself, Sharon Corley, thank you. And my mate, Sarah Dunwood, I'll see you on the other side.
See you later.